I was sitting in my office at Logan's Propane Services when my phone started blowing up with texts from my delivery driver, Marcus. The first one just said, "Problem at Riverside Estates." The second one made my blood run cold. HOA called the cops on me. They're saying I'm trespassing. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, my mind racing through every possible scenario. Riverside Estates was one of those fancy planned communities that had popped up in Jefferson County, Montana about 5 years ago. All identical houses with their beige siding and brown trim, perfectly manicured lawns, and more rules than a maximum security prison. I had been servicing customers there since the development opened, and we had never had a single problem. Until today, apparently. The drive took me 20 minutes, and when I pulled up to the community's main entrance, I could see Marcus's delivery truck parked on the side of the road with 2 patrol cars behind it, their lights flashing. A small crowd had gathered, and right in the middle of it all stood a woman I recognized immediately. Her name was Patricia Hendricks, and she was the president of the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association. I had met her exactly once before, at a community meeting where she had spent 45 minutes explaining why garbage cans needed to be exactly 3 feet from the curb on collection day. I parked my truck and walked over, my company logo clearly visible on my jacket. Marcus looked relieved when he saw me approaching. "Mr. Logan," one of the officers said, recognizing me. It was Deputy Stevens, someone I had gone to high school with. "We got a call about an unauthorized commercial vehicle in the neighborhood." Unauthorized. I looked at Patricia, who was standing there with her arms crossed, looking incredibly pleased with herself. She was probably in her early 50s, with that particular haircut that seemed to be required for HOA board members everywhere. You know the one. Short, layered, with highlights that cost more than most people's car payments. "This is a residential community," Patricia said, her voice sharp and nasal. "We have very strict regulations about commercial vehicles. They're not permitted except in designated service areas, and only with prior written approval from the HOA board." "Patricia," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "Marcus is here delivering propane to the Hendersons at 4427 Maple Ridge Drive. They called us 2 days ago because they were running low." "I don't care what the reason is," she snapped. "The rules are the rules. This truck is an eyesore, it's blocking the view of the community entrance, and it's setting a bad precedent. If we allow one commercial vehicle, then we'll have plumbers and electricians, and who knows what else cluttering up our streets." I stared at her, genuinely confused. "You do have plumbers and electricians here. I've seen their trucks in the neighborhood dozens of times." "Those are different," Patricia said dismissively. "Those are emergency services. Propane delivery is not an emergency service." "Actually, it kind of is," Deputy Stevens interjected. "If someone runs out of propane in this weather, they could freeze to death." "It's been below 20 degrees at night." Patricia's face turned red. "I don't care. The rules clearly state that all commercial vehicles must receive prior approval. This truck did not have approval, therefore it's trespassing. I want it removed immediately, and I want this driver cited." "Madam," Marcus said quietly, "I've been delivering here for 3 years. Nobody ever said anything about needing approval." "Well, the rules recently changed," Patricia said smugly. "We sent out a notification to all residents 2 weeks ago. It's not our responsibility to inform every random delivery person about our community standards." I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my emails. I didn't receive any notification, and I'm on the vendor list for this community. "We have standing accounts with 17 households here." "That's because we removed you from the vendor list," Patricia said. along with several other companies that weren't maintaining our standards of professionalism. What does that even mean? I asked, feeling my temper starting to rise. It means that your trucks are old and unsightly. Your drivers don't wear proper uniforms, and frankly, your company doesn't fit the aesthetic we're trying to maintain here at Riverside Estates. Deputy Stevens cleared his throat. Madam, with all due respect, that's not really a legal reason to ban a business from making deliveries to paying customers. It absolutely is, Patricia insisted. This is private property. The HOA owns the streets, the sidewalks, and the common areas. We have every right to determine who can and cannot access our property. I looked at Deputy Stevens. Is that true? He shrugged. It's complicated. Technically, yes, HOAs do have some authority over their private streets, but residents also have the right to receive necessary services. This would probably have to be settled in civil court. Fine, Patricia said. Then I'm filing a formal complaint and pursuing legal action against Logan's Propane services for repeated violations of our community guidelines. In the meantime, I want this truck removed immediately. Marcus, I said, go ahead and unhook. We'll figure this out. Marcus looked miserable as he climbed back into the truck. The Hendersons were going to run out of propane in the next day or two, and now they were stuck in the middle of this ridiculous power play. As Marcus drove away, Patricia turned to me with a triumphant smile. I suggest you find a new business model, Mr. Logan. Riverside Estates represents a significant portion of the propane customers in this area, and we will not be using your services any longer. I'm sure there are other propane companies that can meet our standards. That's when I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the whole situation just hit me all at once. What's so funny? Patricia demanded. You think there are other propane companies? I managed to get out between laughs. Patricia, Logan's Propane is the only supplier in Jefferson County. The nearest competitor is Billings Propane, and they're 2.5 hours away in Gallatin County. Her smile faltered. That can't be right. It absolutely is right, I said. My grandfather started this business in 1973. When the big corporations bought out most of the independent suppliers in the 90s, he stayed independent. Every other small operation in the area either sold out or went under. Billings Propane services Gallatin and Madison counties, but they don't come this far north. It's not worth it for them. So unless your residents want to drive 3 hours round trip to fill up their own tanks, or pay Billings Propane a massive delivery fee to come out here, I'm their only option. Patricia's face had gone from red to pale. There has to be someone else. There isn't, I said flatly. And you know what? I don't actually need Riverside Estates. Those 17 accounts are nice, but they represent maybe 5% of my business. I have customers all over the county, ranches, farms, businesses, other residential areas. You need me a whole lot more than I need you. Are you threatening me? Patricia's voice had gotten shrill. No, I said calmly. I'm just stating facts. You just banned the only propane supplier in the county from your community. That's your choice. But when your residents start complaining because they can't heat their homes, cook their food, or heat their water, that's going to be on you. I turned to Deputy Stevens. Am I free to go? He nodded. Yeah, there's nothing illegal happening here, just a civil dispute. I walked back to my truck, leaving Patricia standing there with her mouth hanging open. As I drove away, I could see her frantically typing on her phone, probably already trying to find another supplier to prove me wrong. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. It was David Henderson, the customer Marcus had been trying to deliver to. Logan, what the hell happened yesterday? He asked. Patricia Hendricks just sent out an email saying that your company has been banned from the community for safety violations. Is that true? Safety violations. I sat up in bed, now fully awake. No, that's absolutely not true. We've never had a safety violation in our entire history. Patricia called the cops on Marcus because she claims he didn't have prior approval to enter the community. That's insane, David said. We called you for a delivery. That's the approval right there. Apparently not anymore, I said. Look, David, I'm happy to deliver to you, but Patricia made it clear that she's going to call the police every time one of my trucks enters Riverside Estates. I don't want to put my drivers through that kind of harassment. So what are we supposed to do? David sounded panicked now. We're down to about 20% on our tank. That's maybe 3 or 4 days if we're conservative. You have a few options, I said. 1, you can drive to my facility and I can fill up portable tanks for you, but you'd need to make that trip every few days. 2, you can try to find another supplier, but I'm pretty sure I'm the only one in the area. 3, you can take this up with your HOA and try to get them to reverse this ridiculous policy. I'll call an emergency HOA meeting, David said. This is affecting multiple households. Patricia can't just make decisions like this on her own. After I hung up with David, my phone rang 6 more times in the next hour. All Riverside Estates residents, all panicking about their propane situation. I gave them all the same information and suggested they contact their HOA board. Around noon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Logan's Propane Services, I answered. Yes, hello, this is Brenda from Billings Propane. Her voice was professional but slightly amused. I've been getting calls all morning from residents in Jefferson County asking about propane delivery. They're all from the same community, Riverside Estates. Do you know anything about that? Yeah, I said, rubbing my temples. Their HOA president banned my company from entering the community. I told her you were the only other supplier in the region. Brenda laughed. Well, she's been calling us all morning. She offered us an exclusive contract to service Riverside Estates. She seemed very insistent that we could do it. And what did you tell her? I told her exactly what I'm telling you now. We don't service Jefferson County. It's too far from our base of operations. The profit margins don't make sense, and we don't have the capacity to take on that many new customers. I recommended she work things out with you because you're their only realistic option. How did she take that? Not well, Brenda said. She started threatening to report us to some kind of regulatory agency for refusing service. I had to explain to her that we're a private business and we can choose our service areas. Anyway, I just wanted to give you a heads up. She seems pretty determined to find someone, anyone, other than you. Thanks for the call, Brenda. I appreciate it. No problem. Good luck dealing with that one. She sounds like a real piece of work. That afternoon, I was in my shop working on some equipment maintenance when my office manager, Rita, came running out. Logan, you need to see this, she said, holding up her phone. The Riverside Estates HOA just posted this on their community Facebook page. I took the phone and read the post. It was from Patricia, and it was a masterpiece of misinformation. Dear Riverside Estates residents, I want to address the recent concerns about propane service. Yesterday, we were forced to deny access to Logan's propane services due to serious safety and compliance violations. This company has been operating with outdated equipment, inadequate insurance coverage, and has multiple complaints filed against them with the county. For the safety of our community, the HOA board voted unanimously to ban this company from our private streets. We are currently in negotiations with several reputable propane suppliers who meet our high standards. In the meantime, please conserve your propane usage. We expect to have a new supplier in place within the next week. Thank you for your patience as we work to maintain the safety and quality of life that makes Riverside Estates the premier residential community in Jefferson County. Patricia Hendricks, HOA President. I read it twice, feeling my anger build with each word. Every single sentence was either a lie or a distortion of the truth. Can she do that? Rita asked. Just make stuff up like that. It's slander, I said, and it's going to hurt our business if people believe it. I immediately called my lawyer, Frank Morrison. He had handled my business legal work for years, everything from contracts to the occasional customer dispute. Frank, I need your advice on something, I said, and proceeded to tell him the whole story. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Do you have any documentation of your safety record, your insurance coverage, and your compliance with county regulations? Of course. We get inspected annually. Our insurance is top tier because we handle hazardous materials. And we've never had a complaint filed with the county, at least not any legitimate ones. Good. Screenshot that Facebook post immediately. That's textbook defamation. She's making false statements of fact that are damaging to your business reputation. I'll draft a cease and desist letter today. What about the HOA ban itself? Can she actually keep my trucks out? That's trickier, Frank admitted. HOAs do have broad authority over their communities, but they can't violate residents' rights to receive essential services. Propane for heating in Montana winter definitely qualifies as essential. I think we have a strong case that the HOA is overstepping their authority, but it might take a court order to resolve it. How long would that take? Could be weeks or months, depending on the court schedule. But we can file for an emergency injunction given that people need heating fuel. That might get us a hearing within a few days. Do it, I said. Whatever it takes. I'm not going to let this woman destroy my business or leave people without heat because of some power trip. The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls from angry and worried Riverside Estates residents. By 6 p.m., I had heard from 14 of my 17 customers in the community. They were all furious with Patricia and confused about what to do. Several of them had already started making arrangements to stay with family or friends if their propane ran out. One elderly couple, the Martins, told me they couldn't leave because Mrs. Martin was recovering from hip surgery and couldn't travel. Don't worry, I told them. We'll figure something out. I'm not going to let you freeze. That night, I lay awake thinking about the situation. Patricia Hendricks had essentially weaponized her position in the HOA to create a crisis that would affect dozens of families. And for what? Because she thought my trucks were ugly. Because she wanted to flex her authority. It was insane. The next morning, Frank called with an update. I sent the cease and desist letter to Patricia Hendricks and the HOA board. I also filed for an emergency injunction in county court. Judge Martinez agreed to hear the case tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. Can you make it? I'll be there, I said. Good. Bring all your documentation, safety records, insurance certificates, inspection reports, everything. We need to demonstrate that her claims are false and that the ban is unreasonable. I spent the rest of the morning pulling together every document Frank had requested. Rita helped me organize everything into clearly labeled folders. We had our annual safety inspection from just 2 months ago, perfect marks across the board. Our insurance certificates showing liability coverage of $5 million. Letters of recommendation from the county fire marshal and the Montana Public Service Commission. Records showing 0 complaints filed with any regulatory agency. Around noon, David Henderson called again. Logan, there's going to be an emergency HOA meeting tonight at 7 p.m. A bunch of us demanded it. Patricia tried to block it, but the HOA bylaws say that any 5 homeowners can call an emergency meeting with 24 hours notice. We got 12 signatures. That's great, I said. What's the agenda? Removing Patricia as president and reversing the ban on your company. We also want answers about that Facebook post because several of us have friends and family who are asking if it's safe to use your services now. It's all lies, I said. Every word of it. My lawyer sent her a cease and desist letter this morning. Good. Can you come to the meeting? I hesitated. I don't want to make things worse, please, David said. People need to hear the truth directly from you. Patricia is already spreading more rumors, saying that you're trying to bully the HOA with legal threats. Fine. I'll be there. That afternoon, I went to the courthouse for the emergency injunction hearing. Judge Martinez was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had a reputation for cutting through bureaucratic nonsense. Patricia was there with an HOA lawyer I didn't recognize, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Gregory Walsh from a firm in Helena. Frank presented our case first, laying out the facts clearly and methodically. He showed the judge Patricia's Facebook post, explained that Logan's Propane was the only supplier in the county, and demonstrated that the HOA ban was based on false pretenses and would cause immediate harm to residents who needed heating fuel. Walsh, the HOA lawyer, argued that the HOA had broad authority to regulate commercial activity on their private streets and that residents could seek alternative arrangements if they disagreed with the policy. What alternative arrangements? Judge Martinez asked. Mr. Morrison has presented evidence that there are no other propane suppliers serving this area. What exactly are residents supposed to do? They can purchase portable tanks and transport their own propane, Walsh said smoothly. Or they can switch to electric heating systems. In the middle of winter, the judge looked incredulous. You're suggesting that residents should either haul their own propane or install entirely new heating systems because the HOA president doesn't like the way the delivery trucks look. The HOA has legitimate concerns about safety and aesthetics, Walsh insisted. Then let's address those concerns, Judge Martinez said. She looked at the documentation Frank had provided. Mr. Logan's company has perfect safety ratings, adequate insurance, and full compliance with all state and county regulations. The claims made by Mrs. Hendricks appear to be false. As for aesthetics, HOAs do not have unlimited authority to ban essential services based on subjective aesthetic judgments. That would be an unreasonable restraint. She turned to Patricia. Mrs. Hendricks, do you have any actual evidence of safety violations or legitimate complaints against Logan's Propane services? Patricia looked flustered. Well, the trucks are old and they're loud and they create traffic congestion in our neighborhood. How old are the trucks? The judge asked me. The oldest one is from 2019, I said. The newest is from 2023. They're all regularly maintained and inspected. And the traffic congestion, Your Honor, a delivery takes about 15 to 20 minutes. The truck parks in front of the customer's house, we fill their tank and we leave. It's no different from any other delivery service. Judge Martinez nodded. I'm granting the emergency injunction. The HOA ban on Logan's Propane services is suspended pending a full hearing on the merits. Mr. Logan, you are authorized to resume normal delivery operations to Riverside Estates immediately. Mrs. Hendricks, if you or anyone acting on behalf of the HOA interferes with these deliveries or continues to make false and defamatory statements about Mr. Logan's business, you will be held in contempt of court. Do you understand? Patricia's face had turned bright red. This is outrageous. You're violating our property rights." "No," the judge said firmly. "I'm preventing you from violating your residents' rights to receive essential services. There's a difference. We'll schedule a full hearing for 3 weeks from now to address the underlying issues, but in the meantime, the injunction stands." Walsh tried to argue, but the judge cut him off. "My decision is final, counselor. If you want to appeal, you know the process." As we left the courthouse, Patricia practically ran to her car, her phone already pressed to her ear. Frank clapped me on the shoulder. "That went well." Judge Martinez clearly saw through the HOA's arguments. "Thanks, Frank. I appreciate you moving so fast on this." "Just doing my job." Now, about that defamation issue. I'd recommend we pursue that separately. That Facebook post has been shared dozens of times, and it's causing real damage to your reputation. What would that involve? Filing a civil suit for defamation and seeking damages. We'd need to show that her statements were false, that they were made with knowledge of their falsity or reckless disregard for the truth, and that they caused measurable harm to your business. "Let's do it," I said. "I'm tired of playing defense." That evening, I drove to the Riverside Estates Community Center for the emergency HOA meeting. The parking lot was packed, and when I walked into the meeting room, it was standing room only. There had to be at least 80 people there, and the energy in the room was tense. Patricia was sitting at a table in the front with 3 other board members. She looked composed, but I could see the tightness around her eyes. She was worried. David Henderson stood up and called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. As you know, we've called this emergency meeting to address the HOA board's decision to ban Logan's propane services from our community. Many of us were not consulted about this decision, and we're concerned about both the process and the consequences." Patricia immediately jumped in. "The board had every right to make this decision. It's within our authority as outlined in the HOA bylaws. We don't need to consult every single resident about operational decisions." "This isn't an operational decision," a woman named Helen Patterson said, standing up. "This affects our ability to heat our homes. My family has been using Logan's propane for 4 years. They're reliable, professional, and reasonably priced. Why would we ban them?" "Because they don't meet our community standards," Patricia said. "I explained this in my message. There are safety concerns and compliance issues." "That's a lie," I said, speaking up from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look at me. "Everything you said in that Facebook post was false. I have documentation proving it." "You're not a resident," Patricia snapped. "You don't have a right to speak here." "Actually," David said, "I invited him, and according to our bylaws, the person calling the meeting can invite relevant parties to provide information. Logan is absolutely relevant to this discussion." I walked to the front of the room and held up the folders Rita and I had prepared. "This is my company's safety inspection from 2 months ago. Perfect scores. This is our insurance certificate, showing $5 million in liability coverage. These are letters of recommendation from the county fire marshal and the State Public Service Commission. And this is a document showing that we have 0 complaints filed against us with any regulatory agency in the state of Montana. Everything misses." Hendricks said about safety violations and complaints was completely false. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Patricia's face went pale. "Why did you lie to us?" someone shouted. "I didn't lie," Patricia said defensively. "I had concerns based on information I received." "What information?" David demanded. "From who?" Patricia didn't answer. "I'll tell you what this is really about," I said. "Mrs. Hendricks called the police on my delivery driver because she thought my truck was an eyesore. She doesn't like the way they look. This has nothing to do with safety or compliance." It's about her personal aesthetic preferences. Is that true, Patricia? One of the other board members asked. It was a man named Robert Chen, and he looked furious. Well, yes, the trucks are quite old and unsightly, Patricia admitted, and they do detract from the community's appearance. My truck is from 2023, I said. It's 2 years old, and it looks like every other propane delivery truck in the state. There's nothing unusual or unsightly about it. We should be using a supplier that presents a more professional image, Patricia insisted. There is no other supplier, David said. Logan's Propane is the only company serving Jefferson County. The next nearest supplier is over 2 hours away and won't deliver here. Patricia's face went from pale to red. That's not true. There are always alternatives. Actually, it is true, I said. I've been the only supplier here for over a decade. When you ban my company, you essentially cut off the propane supply for the entire community. Several of your residents are down to just a few days of fuel. The Martins are elderly, and Mrs. Martin just had hip surgery. She can't travel. What exactly did you expect them to do? The room had gone quiet. People were staring at Patricia with expressions ranging from anger to disbelief. I move that we remove Patricia Hendricks as HOA president, David said formally. And I move that we immediately rescind the ban on Logan's propane services. I second both motions, Helen said immediately. You can't do this, Patricia said, her voice rising. I've served this community for 5 years. I've worked tirelessly to maintain our property values and our standards. You've abused your authority, Robert said quietly. You made a decision that affects everyone without consulting the board or the residents. You made false public statements that damaged a local business's reputation. And you created a situation where families could have been left without heat in the middle of winter. That's not leadership, Patricia. That's a power trip. The vote was called. For removing Patricia as president, 73. Against, 4, 3 abstentions. The motion to rescind the ban on my company was even more lopsided. 78 in favor, 2 against, 0 abstentions. Patricia gathered her things in silence and walked out of the meeting. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. After the meeting, dozens of people came up to me to apologize and to schedule deliveries. I spent an hour taking down names and addresses and promising that we'd get everyone topped off within the next week. As I was leaving, David pulled me aside. Logan, I'm really sorry about all this. If I had known what Patricia was planning, I would have stopped it before it got this far. It's not your fault, I said. You can't control what she does. The board is going to formally apologize to you in writing. And we'd like to discuss maybe putting up a small sign at the community entrance listing approved service providers with your company at the top, just as a gesture of goodwill. I appreciate that, David, really, but just letting me do my job is enough. Over the next 3 days, Marcus and I worked overtime to catch up on all the Riverside Estates deliveries. Everyone we dealt with was apologetic and grateful. The Martins even baked me a pie, which was probably the best apple pie I'd ever had. On the 4th day after the HOA meeting, I got a call from Frank. Logan, we have a problem. Well, you have a problem. Patricia Hendricks just filed a countersuit against you. For what? She's claiming that you defamed her at the HOA meeting and that you conspired with David Henderson to orchestrate her removal from the board. She's seeking damages for emotional distress and loss of reputation. I sat down heavily in my office chair. You've got to be kidding me. I wish I was. She's also filed complaints with the Better Business Bureau and the Montana Public Service Commission, claiming that you've been operating without proper permits and that you engaged in predatory business practices by creating a monopoly situation. That's absurd. I didn't create a monopoly. I'm just the only one left after everyone else got bought out or went out of business, and I have all my permits. We just got inspected 2 months ago. I know that, and the complaints won't go anywhere because they're baseless. But it's harassment, plain and simple. She's trying to bury you in paperwork and legal fees. So what do? We fight back harder. I'm going to file a motion to dismiss her countersuit as frivolous, and I'm going to pursue the defamation case more aggressively. We're also going to document every false complaint she files and add them to our case as evidence of malicious intent. This is getting out of hand, Frank. I agree, but sometimes people like Patricia Hendricks don't stop until they're forced to stop. We need to make it clear that there are consequences for this behavior. The next few weeks were stressful. I was constantly dealing with legal paperwork, responding to bogus complaints, and trying to keep my business running smoothly. Rita was a godsend, handling most of the day-to-day operations while I dealt with the legal nightmare. The BBB complaint was dismissed within a week after they reviewed our documentation. The Public Service Commission took a little longer, but they eventually sent me a letter stating that they had investigated the complaint and found no violations. In fact, they commended us on our safety record and customer service. Patricia's countersuit was scheduled for a hearing in early February. Frank was confident it would be dismissed, but it was still hanging over my head. In the meantime, life at Riverside Estates had settled down. The HOA board elected a new president, a retired accountant named Margaret Thompson, who seemed much more reasonable than Patricia. She reached out to me personally to apologize for the whole situation and to assure me that Logan's Propane was welcome in the community. I barely saw or heard from Patricia. According to David, she had basically retreated from all community activities and was keeping to herself. A few people mentioned seeing her car in the driveway, but otherwise, she seemed to have gone into hiding. Then, in mid-February, everything escalated in a way I never could have predicted. I was at my facility on a Tuesday morning when Deputy Stevens showed up. He looked serious. "Logan, I need to talk to you about Patricia Hendricks." "What about her?" "She filed a police report yesterday claiming that someone has been vandalizing her property and that you're the prime suspect." I stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I'm afraid I am. She says someone slashed her tires, spray painted her mailbox, and left threatening notes on her door. She claims it's retaliation for the HOA situation." "Stevens, I haven't been anywhere near her house. I've been busy running my business and dealing with her lawsuits. Why would I risk everything to vandalize her property?" "I don't think you did it," Stevens said, "but I have to investigate." "Can you account for your whereabouts on the nights in question?" He gave me the dates, and I pulled up my calendar. On 2 of the 3 nights, I had been at the facility until almost 9 p.m. doing maintenance work. Rita had been there too, working late on quarterly reports. On the 3rd night, I had been at home watching a basketball game. My neighbor had come over to watch it with me. "I can verify all of that," I said. "Rita can confirm the 2 nights at work, and my neighbor Mark can confirm the 3rd night." "Good. I'll need their contact information." "Look, Logan, between you and me, this smells like more of Patricia's games, but I have to do this by the book." "I understand. Do what you need to do." Stevens interviewed Rita and my neighbor, and within a few days I was cleared, but Patricia wasn't done. A week later, she filed another police report, this time claiming that someone had broken into her garage and stolen tools and equipment worth over $2,000. This time, Stevens wasn't as sympathetic. "Logan, I need you to be honest with me. Have you been near Patricia's house for any reason?" "No. I told you that. I have no reason to go near her house. I don't even know which house is hers." "It's 4289 Oak Hill Court, and here's the thing. One of her neighbors has a security camera that covers part of the street. We reviewed the footage from the night of the alleged break-in. My stomach dropped. And there's no break-in. No one entered or left her garage, no vehicles except hers in the driveway, nothing suspicious at all. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. So she made it up. It's looking that way. I'm going to talk to her again, and depending on what she says, she could be facing charges for filing a false police report. The next day, Stevens went to Patricia's house with another officer. What they found shocked everyone. Patricia answered the door in her pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. The house was a mess, with papers and trash everywhere. When Stevens questioned her about the security camera footage, she became agitated and started making increasingly bizarre claims. She said that I had hacked the camera to delete the evidence. She said that I had bribed the neighbor to lie. She said that there was a conspiracy against her involving me, the HOA board, and even the police department. Stevens, recognizing that something was seriously wrong, called for a mental health crisis team. Patricia was evaluated and transported to the hospital for a psychiatric assessment. It turned out that Patricia had been struggling with some serious mental health issues that had been exacerbated by the stress of being removed from the HOA board. According to her sister, who was contacted by the hospital, Patricia had become increasingly paranoid and delusional over the past few weeks. The vandalism and theft had never happened. She had slashed her own tires and spray-painted her own mailbox because, in her distorted thinking, she believed it would help her case against me. I felt a complicated mix of emotions when I heard this. On one hand, I was angry about everything she had put me through. On the other hand, I felt genuinely sorry for her. She clearly needed help, not legal battles. Frank called me the day after Patricia was hospitalized. "Logan, I just got notice that all of Patricia's lawsuits against you have been withdrawn. Her sister has taken over her affairs and is working with Patricia's lawyer to resolve everything." "That's good," I said. "What about our defamation suit?" "That's up to you. Given the circumstances, we could pursue it, but I'm not sure there's much point. Patricia doesn't have significant assets, and any judgment we get probably wouldn't be collectible. Plus, it would look pretty bad to go after someone who's clearly dealing with mental health issues." I thought about it for a long moment. "Drop it. I just want this to be over. Are you sure?" "She caused you a lot of damage." "I'm sure. My business is fine. My reputation is intact. People know the truth. Dragging this out isn't going to help anyone. Okay, I'll file a dismissal." A week later, Patricia's sister, Karen, reached out to me. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I was hesitant, but I agreed. Karen was younger than Patricia, probably in her mid-40s, with a kind face and tired eyes. We met at a small cafe in town, and she got right to the point. "Mr. Logan, I want to apologize for everything my sister put you through. She's always been a bit controlling and intense, but I had no idea how bad things had gotten. The doctors say she had a breakdown triggered by the stress of losing the HOA position. She had invested so much of her identity in that role that when it was taken away, she just unraveled." "I appreciate you telling me this," I said. "How is she doing now?" "Better. She's in a treatment program and she's on medication that seems to be helping. She's starting to see how irrational her behavior was. She asked me to tell you that she's sorry. She's not ready to face you directly yet, but she wanted you to know that she regrets everything. Tell her I appreciate that. I also wanted to ask you about her propane service. She's going to need deliveries once she's back home. I know that's asking a lot after everything she did, but you're the only supplier in the area, and I just want to make sure she'll be taken care of." I took a sip of my coffee, thinking, of course we'll deliver to her. She's a customer like anyone else. What happened was complicated and she clearly wasn't well. I'm not going to hold it against her." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. That means more than you know." By early March, things had finally returned to normal. Patricia returned home from the treatment program and kept a low profile in the community. I saw her once from a distance when Marcus was making a delivery on her street. She gave a small, awkward wave. I waved back. The full hearing on the HOA ban never happened because the ban had been rescinded, and Patricia's legal actions had all been withdrawn. Judge Martinez closed the case with a notation that the matter had been resolved by the parties. My business actually benefited from the whole ordeal in an unexpected way. The story spread around the county, and I got a lot of sympathy and support from the community. Several new customers reached out, including some commercial accounts that had been using the Supplier from Gallatin County. They said they wanted to support a local business that had been treated so unfairly. I also got a few calls from reporters wanting to do stories about the situation. I declined most of them. The last thing I wanted was to pile onto Patricia when she was already struggling. But I did agree to one interview with the local paper, and I focused on the broader issues about HOA overreach and the importance of access to essential services. The reporter did a fair job with the story, and it actually led to some interesting discussions in the community about HOA governance and accountability. David Henderson called me in April with an update on the Riverside Estates HOA. "Logan, I wanted you to know that we've completely rewritten the HOA bylaws. We've added provisions requiring board approval for any bans or restrictions on service providers, and we've created a formal appeal process for residents and vendors who disagree with board decisions. We also added term limits for board members and a recall process that's easier to use than what we had before." "That's great, David. It sounds like some real positive changes came out of all this. We're calling them the Logan provisions," he said with a laugh. "Figured you earned it." "You don't have to do that. Too late. It's already in the bylaws. We even added a preamble that talks about the importance of balancing community standards with residents' rights and access to essential services." Your situation was a wake-up call for a lot of people about how much power HOAs can abuse if there aren't proper checks and balances. In May, I was invited to speak at a state HOA conference in Helena. Apparently, word had spread about the Riverside Estates situation, and other communities were interested in learning from it. I was nervous about public speaking, but Rita convinced me to do it. The presentation went better than I expected. I talked about the situation from a business owner's perspective, emphasizing the importance of communication, reasonableness, and not making decisions based on personal biases or aesthetic preferences. I also talked about the need for HOAs to remember that their primary job is to serve the residents, not to exercise control for its own sake. During the Q&A session, a woman stood up and identified herself as an HOA president from Missoula. "Mr. Logan, what would you say to HOA boards who are concerned about maintaining community standards while also ensuring access to services?" "I'd say that those two goals aren't mutually exclusive," I replied. "If you have legitimate concerns about a service provider, whether it's safety, noise, or timing of deliveries, have a conversation with them. Most business owners want to be good neighbors and will work with you to address reasonable concerns. But don't make up fake violations or ban people based on how their trucks look. That's not maintaining standards. That's just being petty." The audience laughed and applauded, and several people came up to me afterward to share their own stories about HOA conflicts. It was eye-opening to realize how common these issues were. By summer, The whole situation felt like a distant memory. I was busy with the seasonal increase in propane demand for summer cookouts and camping trips. My business was thriving, and I had even hired another delivery driver to help with the increased workload. One Saturday in July, I was at the facility doing some paperwork when a car pulled into the lot. It was Patricia. She got out slowly and walked toward the office, looking nervous. I met her at the door. "Patricia, how are you doing?" "I'm okay," she said quietly. "Better than I was. Can we talk for a few minutes?" "Sure, come on in." We sat in my small office, and for a moment neither of us said anything. "I've been in therapy," Patricia finally said. "Working through a lot of things. Part of my treatment is making amends to people I hurt. You're at the top of that list." "You already apologized through your sister," I said. "I know, but I needed to do it myself, face to face. What I did to you and your business was terrible. I was dealing with a lot of personal issues, and I took it out on you for reasons that had nothing to do with you or your company. I made up lies, I harassed you with legal actions, I tried to ruin your reputation. There's no excuse for any of it." "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "I'm glad you're getting help. The thing is," Patricia continued, "I built my whole life around being in control. Being the HOA president gave me a sense of purpose and importance. When that was taken away, I just fell apart. But I'm learning that real self-worth doesn't come from controlling other people or having a title. It comes from how you treat people and what kind of person you choose to be." "That sounds like good progress," I said. "I'm also volunteering now," she said with a small smile. "At the senior center in town, helping organize activities and programs. It turns out I'm actually pretty good at event planning when I'm not being a tyrannical nightmare." I laughed. "I'm glad you found something positive. Anyway, I won't take up any more of your time. I just wanted you to hear directly from me that I'm sorry, and that I'm grateful you didn't destroy me when you had every right to." After she left, I sat in my office for a while, thinking about everything that had happened over the past 6 months. It had been one of the most stressful periods of my professional life, but it had also taught me some valuable lessons about standing up for yourself, the importance of documentation, and the fact that sometimes people's actions are driven by things that have nothing to do with you. My grandfather had always said that the propane business was about more than just delivering fuel. It was about being part of the community, being reliable when people needed you, and treating everyone with respect. He would have been proud of how I handled the situation with Patricia, I thought. Not just the legal fight, but the decision to show compassion when she was at her lowest. In September, I got invited to another event, this time a county business leaders' luncheon. The Chamber of Commerce was recognizing local businesses that had shown resilience and integrity in challenging circumstances. To my surprise, I was one of the honorees. The president of the chamber, a woman named Linda Foster, gave a speech about my situation. Logan demonstrated what it means to be a true community business partner. When faced with unfair treatment and false accusations, he stood his ground and defended his reputation. But he also showed compassion and understanding when he learned about the challenges his accuser was facing. He balanced strength with kindness, and that's the kind of business leadership our community needs. I gave a short acceptance speech, thanking my team, my lawyer, and the customers who had supported me through everything. As I looked out at the audience, I saw David Henderson and several other Riverside Estates residents who had come to support me. I even saw Patricia sitting in the back, clapping politely. After the luncheon, a young man approached me. He introduced himself as Josh, and he said he was starting a small HVAC business in the county. "Mr. Logan, I just wanted to say that I followed your story in the papers, and it really inspired me." I'm just getting started with my business, and I've already run into some HOA issues in a different community. Hearing how you handled your situation gave me the courage to stand up for myself and not just roll over when people make unreasonable demands. Good for you, I said. Just remember, pick your battles. Some things are worth fighting for and some things aren't. Know the difference. That's good advice. Thank you. As I drove home that evening, I thought about how strange and unpredictable life could be. 6 months ago, I had been dealing with what felt like a crisis that could destroy my business. Now, I was being honored for how I handled it, and my business was stronger than ever. The whole experience had also changed how I thought about my role in the community. I had always just seen myself as a guy who delivered propane, but I realized that being the only supplier in the county came with a certain responsibility. People depended on me, not just for fuel but for reliability and fairness. That was something I needed to take seriously. In October, the Riverside Estates HOA held their annual community picnic. Margaret Thompson, the new HOA president, invited me to attend as a guest of honor. I was hesitant at first, but Rita convinced me to go. "You should go," she said. "It'll be good for business relations, and it sounds like they really want to make things right." So I went. The picnic was held in the community park, a nice green space with playground equipment and picnic tables. There were probably 200 people there, and I was surprised by how many came up to thank me for continuing to provide service to the community after everything that had happened. David Henderson introduced me to his family, including his teenage kids who thanked me for making sure they had hot water for showers. The Martins brought me another pie. Several people wanted to take photos with me, which felt weird but also kind of nice. Patricia was there too, helping to set up food tables and clean up trash. She gave me a smile and a nod but kept her distance, which I appreciated. She seemed calmer and more at peace than I had ever seen her. At one point, Margaret pulled me aside. "Logan, I wanted to let you know that the board voted to give you our Community Partner Award. It's a new thing we're starting this year. We want to recognize businesses and individuals who go above and beyond for Riverside Estates." "That's not necessary," I said. "Maybe not, but we want to do it anyway. You could have written us off after the Patricia situation, but you didn't. You kept serving our residents and you showed grace and professionalism through the whole ordeal. That deserves recognition." The award was a plaque with my name and company logo on it. It wasn't fancy, but it meant something. I hung it in my office next to my grandfather's old business license from 1973. By the end of the year, the whole situation with Patricia and the HOA had become a story I told occasionally when people asked about challenges I had faced in business. It had a good ending, with lessons learned and relationships repaired. But more importantly, it had reminded me why I loved what I did. Running a propane business in rural Montana wasn't glamorous. It was early mornings and late nights, dealing with equipment breakdowns and difficult weather and occasionally unreasonable customers. But it was also about being there for people when they needed you, building relationships with the community, and carrying on the legacy my grandfather had started more than 50 years ago. In December, I was doing year-end inventory when my phone rang. It was Karen, Patricia's sister. "Hi, Logan, I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all. What's up?" "I wanted to let you know that Patricia is doing really well. She's been stable on her medication, she's continuing with therapy, and she's even dating someone she met at the senior center volunteering." "That's great to hear." "She wanted me to tell you something else. She's been working with her therapist on understanding what happened last winter, and she wrote you a letter. She's not ready to send it yet, but she wanted you to know it exists. Maybe someday she'll be brave enough to give it to you." Tell her there's no pressure. She's already apologized and I've moved on. I will. But I think writing it has been therapeutic for her, putting everything down on paper, taking full accountability. It's part of her healing process. After we hung up, I thought about forgiveness and second chances. Patricia had done some terrible things, but she had also been dealing with untreated mental illness. She had taken responsibility, gotten help, and was working to become a better person. That took courage. I never did receive that letter, and I was okay with that. Some things are better left private. What mattered was that Patricia was healing and that the whole situation had resolved in a way that didn't leave lasting damage. As I locked up the office that night and headed home, I looked out at the Montana landscape, dark and cold under a clear winter sky. Somewhere in Jefferson County, Propane was heating homes, cooking dinners, and keeping families safe and comfortable through another brutal winter. And I was the one making sure that happened. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was an important one. And after everything that had happened in the past year, I had a deeper appreciation for that importance. I had also learned that standing up for yourself and your business was necessary sometimes, even when it was uncomfortable. But so was compassion and knowing when to let go. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Truck number 2 needs a new fuel pump. Found out during tonight's check. Can it wait until Monday or should I order overnight? I texted back. Order overnight. We have deliveries scheduled for Sunday afternoon. Can't afford any delays. This was my life. Fuel pumps and delivery schedules, HOA disputes and customer relationships, legal battles and community picnics. It was messy and complicated and occasionally frustrating. But it was also deeply satisfying in ways that were hard to articulate. My grandfather used to say that a good business wasn't measured by how much money it made, but by how well it served its community and how it treated people, even when times were tough. I had tried to live up to that standard through the whole ordeal with Patricia and the HOA, and I hoped I had succeeded. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw my neighbor Mark outside shoveling snow. He waved me over. "Hey, Logan, I heard you won some kind of award from the Chamber of Commerce." "Yeah, back in September. Good for you, man. After all that crap with the crazy HOA lady, you deserved some recognition. It all worked out in the end. Still, you handled it well. I would have probably done something stupid and made everything worse." I laughed. I was tempted a few times, believe me. We chatted for a few more minutes about nothing in particular, just two neighbors shooting the breeze on a cold December evening. It was normal and comfortable and exactly what I needed after a long day. Inside my house, I made myself dinner and settled in to watch some TV, but my mind kept drifting back to everything that had happened over the past year. The fear I had felt when Patricia first called the cops on Marcus. The anger when I saw her lies on Facebook. The satisfaction of winning the court case. The complicated feelings when I learned about her mental health struggles. The pride when the chamber recognized my business. The simple contentment of seeing the whole situation resolve peacefully. It had been a hell of a ride, but I had come through it stronger and wiser. My business was thriving, my reputation was intact, and I had learned valuable lessons about conflict, compassion, and community. The next morning, I was back at the facility at 7 a.m., ready for another day of deliveries and customer calls and the 1,000 small tasks that kept a propane business running. Rita arrived a few minutes later with coffee and donuts. "Morning, boss. Ready for the last push before Christmas." "Ready as I'll ever be. What's on the schedule today?" She ran through the day's deliveries and appointments. 12 residential customers, 2 commercial accounts, and a new customer consultation at 3 p.m. It was going to be a busy day. As I headed out to check on the trucks and equipment, I felt a sense of deep satisfaction. This was my business, my community, my life. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And after everything I had been through in the past year, I knew I could handle whatever challenges came next. The story of Patricia Hendricks and the Riverside Estates HOA would become part of the Logan's Propane legend, a cautionary tale about HOA overreach and a reminder about the importance of standing up for yourself while also showing compassion when appropriate. People would talk about it for years, and it would come up whenever someone mentioned HOA disputes or small business challenges. But for me, it was just another chapter in the ongoing story of running a family business in rural Montana. There would be other challenges, other conflicts, other situations that required wisdom and courage. That was just part of life and business. What mattered was how you handled those challenges. Whether you stood up when you needed to stand up, showed compassion when compassion was appropriate, and always tried to do the right thing even when the right thing wasn't easy or obvious. My grandfather had taught me that, and I had passed that test with Patricia and the HOA. Now I just had to keep living up to that standard, one delivery at a time, one customer at a time, one challenge at a time. As I climbed into the cab of Truck 2 to test the new fuel pump Marcus had installed overnight, I smiled. This was my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.